world, this is Sarah, and I'm going to show you today how to make a design and build a Foamcore holder for an NCE ProCab or PowerCab throttle. The first step is going to be to trace out the object you want to make a holder for, and I'm making sure here to mark out the spot where the cable port is, as well as how high I want the holder to go, because I think it's okay to block up some of those consist buttons, but I don't really want to block the other buttons as much as possible. I'm also making marks for the width of the device and being sure to label things so that later on I'll remember what these little marks I made were. When you're designing a holder for something, it's a good idea to give a little bit of relief on the edges where the object is going to slot into the holder. So you can see I'm drawing the holder right now, and I'm giving a little bit of a taper to the front corners so it'll be easier to slip the cab in when we go to use it. Now that I have the basic design down, it's important to make sure that my lines are square before I go to build. So I'm using the lines here on my mat to help me. I found the straightest bit at the bottom and I've lined it with one of the yellow lines on my mat, and then I'm just taping the paper in place before I go ahead and square up all of my draft lines. I also want the front holder bits to be as identical as possible. So just to make the template look right, I'm measuring and making sure that the two tabs for the holder match. Moving on to the template for the sides, the first step I did was to measure how wide the side was. I got about 1 1/8 inches, so I made some marks 1 inch apart using the grid on my cutting mat, and then added an extra 1/8 inch. This is actually where I made my first mistake though, because I forgot to leave margins for the glue up to account for the thickness of the material. Later on in the video I'll have to remake this template piece to try to fix that mistake. But here's the finished template draft for now. It has the back, 2 front tabs, the side and the bottom all marked out. After finishing this project, I did create a final template with all the mistakes fixed, and that's available for download in the link in the video description. If you do print the template from PDF, be sure to print it at 100% and use the inch square provided to check the scale. The next steps will be to just cut out the template, lay it out on the Foamcore, and then trace it and transfer the markings. I'm using Elmer's foam board here. I usually buy it in 18-inch by 24-inch sheets, and it's 3/16 of an inch thick. You can see that this piece has a little bit of a bounce or a bend to it, but that won't really matter at the end. When we have all the pieces cut and glued together, they'll kind of hold each other square. So go ahead and lay out the template, and then copy all the marks across to the Foamcore. You might want to move things around a bit to figure out what works best for whatever shape your Foamcore currently is. Mine has this weird cutout, so I've just kind of worked around that to lay out the pieces as best I can. In order to make the front tabs look exactly the same, I decided to just use the same template that I cut out and flip it over for the opposite side. This is going to cause a tiny problem at the end where the sides are going to be a little bit too high, because as you can see I'm just about to cut down the front tabs a little bit where they overlap. In the PDF template, again, that's all fixed and it has nice perfect sides that match the front. Now that we're ready to cut, let's talk about your craft knife. I'm using an Olfa craft knife, so it has an adjustable depth, and I'm going to measure how deep I want and give a little bit of extra space to make it easier to cut. I'm right-handed, so I'm going to turn the Foamcore to a comfortable angle for me, which means that I'm going to be cutting downwards and to my right. When you make a cut in Foamcore, it's best to make 3 cuts. The first is to cut just the top layer of paper. The second will cut through most of the styrofoam in the middle, and then a third cut to cut the back layer of paper and separate out the piece. This is going to help to minimize tear out of the styrofoam and give you the cleanest edge. You also want to make sure you're using a nice sharp knife. Once you're done cutting out your pieces, take a pencil and mark what pieces they are so that once they're all cut out, you don't lose track of which piece is which. I'm using Aleene's original Tacky glue here. It starts to set up quickly so you don't have to hold the pieces long, and once I've put the sides on, I'm going to do a test fit and have a problem. Because like I said before, I forgot to add glue margins, so the back piece, which is cut exactly to the size of the cab, is not going to let me have those side pieces attached to it. I need to actually attach the side pieces on the outside edges of the back piece, so I'll need to recut and redo the template for those side pieces. So in order to make the side widths properly, I'm just going to glue together 2 pieces of Foamcore here and add that width to the edge. Despite deliberating about it for a little bit here, I actually screwed up the bottom template again, so I ended up not using the paper template and just tracing a template in place later. I just wanted to highlight one of the tools I'm using here. This is the Rockler Silicone Micro Glue Brush Set. It has 3 different brushes, and they're great for cleaning up glue squeeze out, like you can see here. The brushes that come with it are an angle tip, a fine point tip, and kind of a flat ridged tip. All of them are really useful when you're trying to spread out some glue. I'm also using the tray from Rockler's 3-piece silicone glue application kit in this video, so you may see that later. I put a piece of white copy paper down on my cutting mat when I'm doing the glue up, just because I'd rather have the glue stick to that paper and not stick to my mat. Here you can see the problem with the second version of the bottom template. It just isn't quite wide enough. So I'm going to just use some scrap Foamcore and trace out a template in place on the model. After your glue up has a chance to set for a bit, you can optionally take some extra PVA or tacky glue and seal all the cut edges of your Foamcore. If you plan on painting your holder, you really should do this extra step, otherwise a lot of paint will soak into those cut edges. Gave it some time to dry and then hit it with a coat of spray paint, and this is the finished product.